Unless you have one.
Welcome to the About podcast. Here we explore your financial health in simple and easy to understand ways.
All right, well, welcome everybody back to the About podcast. As always, I am Jeremy Scott, one of your hosts here, and of course, I'm ably joined by Roy Hucke. Roy, how are we doing today?
I am splendid, my friend. Splendid. I really like the this time of year, so I'm pretty happy.
I know. I don't know when this is going to release, so I don't know what time of year people will be listening to it. But here it's fall, and
beautiful fall in Colorado.
Yes, finally it's fall. I thought summer was going to hang on forever. So
it's been hot.
It is. Well, we got a very special guest. I guess all our guests are wonderful and special. We have a very special guest today, Julian Heron, who is the other part of Credentialed Wealth Advisors, of which Roy is, of course, a principal in and part of the reason why we're doing this whole thing. So, Julian, it's great to have you with us here in the studio.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So you guys, I mean, I have a little knowledge of the history of how you guys came together to start this thing. And I think it's been, 3 years now? How long has Credentialed Wealth been going on?
We launched March 1st, 2021.
21. Ooh.
Heading to 4.
Yep. So we're at 3.5 roughly years right now, which is pretty awesome.
Okay.
And we're the original founders, the original two, if you will.
Right.
That kind of came together with the idea.
Right. But obviously you guys knew each other before that, for some amount of time. You don't usually just decide to get into business with somebody that you don't know very well. So colleagues, I assume, before that in the financial planning, financial management world.
Yep. So Julian is based out of Colorado Springs. So he's in our office down there. And we ultimately met through our former employer.
Yeah.
And where did we meet?
In Romania.
Romania, where you meet all your fun people.
Yeah. We live in Colorado, but we somehow met in Romania.
That's right.
That was the first time you guys met was in Romania.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Even though you were working for the same place.
Yep.
Doing a similar thing.
Yep. So we were on a travel award kind of thing that our company sent us on, and we actually met over there.
Okay.
My father was with me. And your wife and my dad.
I met him first, actually.
I think so. And your wife, Jessica, and my dad kind of hit it off. They enjoyed chatting, and
nice.
We did a couple meals together and just got to know each other in that loose, comfortable format of traveling and vacationing. And that's how we were originally introduced together.
Nice. Well, Roy's dad's a good guy. I've met Roy's dad a couple of times now. He's a good dude. So, yeah. And so somewhere in there, though, the idea must have come up to say, maybe we want to do what we're doing because you're still in the same basic world you were in when you were working for your former firm. But you wanted to do it, either do it yourselves or do it differently, or you thought there was something better you could do if you were doing it by, on your own. So what was the seed? What was the thing? I wish we could do this, and I think we could do this better if we were actually doing it by ourselves. Because that's a pretty big jump.
Yeah.
Right? It's a pretty big jump to leave the safety of a firm that's got resources and all the stuff with it and everything. And I think a lot of people who have thoughts or ideas or any kind of entrepreneurial kind of, thought, you're just like, it's a pretty big jump to make out of that kind of what might feel like a more safe environment into a very risky environment. Small business. Well, usually risky.
And it's risky to even in that world to even talk with other people about leaving.
Right.
Because it'd be instant termination. But I think it started kind of with a joke of dumping on some other FAs. I was with a friend of mine who's just about to retire this upcoming year. And we were kind of bellied up to the bar, and I think Roy came up, and we were making fun of these others and what they were saying, because there was a few people there who felt like they should never have to go to the office and never have to talk to a client.
Their goal was literally to work as low as possible.
Yeah. And to clear, FA you mean by financial advisor.
That's correct.
Yep.
Exactly.
Keep us off the lingo. Yes.
Yeah,
I do my best.
Yeah. And so they thought, they should get all the money, but do zero of the work. Their assistant can do it all. So we were making fun of them, and I think Roy heard, and we had kind of seen him or met him through the dad. And,
right.
So then he joined in, and I was like, kindred spirit. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that all happened in Romania.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So at a bar in Romania.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right. And so I kind of heard a little bit of in there, but so the differentiator was about client service.
Well, let's paint the picture a little bit, right? So for our audience, we were working for a firm that is kind of like the Titanic. Right. It's this huge immovable object that is really hard to turn. It is what it is.
Does what it does.
Not a bad thing by any means, but it just is something different than what we potentially wanted to be.
Right.
There's some nuance in our industry. There's some regulatory requirements and different positions for how you set up your companies. And that was kind of the catalyst that I think was the origination of making a change.
Okay.
But we wanted to be more like the frigate and, the quick little ship that can just maneuver and adjust and do things. Well, to do that, you have to be a small company. Mm-hmm. And there's pros and cons to that. Right. So we had to go through the rigors of setting up a company and figuring all that out. But Julian, why don't you set the table for the compliance regimes that exist and then what we're actually under versus what we were under, if that makes sense?
Sure.
That'll give us, I think, some people better understanding of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So starting with the Titanic, I think that a good way to see that is that though it makes sense from an organizational standpoint to have an agenda for meetings, you were not allowed to have one. And
for client meetings.
For client meetings.
Yeah. Oh.
So just little things to set the standard because there's so many people there that they had to manage that down to the lowest common denominator.
Okay.
So anything for client service, generally in that regime, which is the broker-dealer side of our world, which I'll get into in a minute, oftentimes things that make sense you just can't do unless you go to a different compliance regime.
Right.
And the reason you can't is because in a broker-dealer world, you earn commissions, and so therefore there are potential conflicts of interest. And it turns out there's several. My background was in sales, business to business originally, and we had all kinds of training constantly to go up against trained buyers and things. And when I got to this one and saw how many different ways that the industry made money, I was like, gosh, you shouldn't sell at all because there's already too much of an informational disadvantage between you and your client. And there's too many different ways money is coming in. But that's not really how a broker-dealer is set up, and that's not what they're structured for. If your goal is to do that so you can just act in their best interests, and then that is your standard, well, that's an RIA, which is what we are.
RIA stands for what?
A registered investment advisor. And there is essentially one standard there. It's a fiduciary standard. You must act in your client's best interest and be able to prove it to a similarly trained person who would look at your actions.
So previously it was a broker-dealer model.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then because that was a commission-based model, the regulatory framework was what it sounds like fairly restrictive around certain things.
Around everything,
including you can't even have an agenda for...
Correct.
To avoid conflict of interest, right? You're
I thought we did, but that may be something
that was after enough pushback. They gave us a pre-made one.
Yeah, you could click a button and say you can talk about this.
You could not have your own agenda for that client for their needs.
Yeah.
Okay, because the idea is like, you might be steering them towards the product with the higher commission.
That's
You've
right.
got to avoid any substance of that. So it's like...
Or at least proof of it.
Right.
You best avoid proof of it.
Right. But there exists within your industry, and I know this a little bit just from Roy in this podcast, working this podcast with Roy, there are other ways that, you guys clearly still make money at what you do. Obviously, you need to.
Yeah.
But there's other ways to do that don't come with all that baggage.
Well, so
That's right.
Let me give you another thing about the restrictiveness, right? So lowest common denominator, right? And if you wanted to do this podcast on that platform, it was a hard no. We had people at the former company that were offered by big podcasts in the country could they come on, and the compliance regime just told them no, we can't do it because if they open that can of worms, they'd have to let everybody do it. And they don't have the ability to create the oversight to oversee it and make it so that everybody can do it and make sure they don't get sued along the way and yada, 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 right? So again, the Titanic, so it's just a hard no, doors closed, can't do it. Well, we're now able to do a podcast. We have a compliance company that helps us. We pay them. Right. And they oversee this and we get all these podcasts compliant approved.
Right.
And it can be done. Right. So some of them were restrictive by the regulators and some of it was company created restrictions because they didn't want to get sued or create risk for themselves. So, but that's the world that it's in. And that's why we left that world.
Right.
That world also has what they call soft dollars. And for Julian and myself right now, we get paid one way and that's by the client and it's on their statement. They see what they're paying us.
I've seen it.
And the other format, it's not illegal. It's just the way it was originally done and kind of evolved.
Right.
Where you could have a company pay like an investment company could, like a management company could write a check to the employer that we were working for and get on access to the platform. And then their advisors could sell it.
Called revenue share.
Yeah,
okay.
It's legal, but
sure.
But it creates soft dollars that then I or Julian could get some revenue from that through a roundabout way, which just creates conflict.
Right.
And we could be incentivized in other ways in a way that's not transparent.
And to give you an idea too, the preferred vendors in that space then pay extra, then get access to go to the meetings, and then end up paying for those meetings in a lot of cases,
which pushes them
company
to the top of the list of like, what company should I pick for this investment?
Well,
here's the top. Here's the preferred.
And in fact, the most common thing I got from other financial advisors while at that firm was a call, because I'm a chartered investment analyst and or financial analyst rather, but they would call and say, I've been doing what the wholesalers told me to do on investments and it's not working. And that's because there wasn't really training there. The idea was the wholesalers, the very biased salespeople, will teach you what to do.
Right.
And the only ones that got access were the ones that paid the most.
So I don't know if this is an apt analogy or not. Where my head is going with this is my late wife was in healthcare, and she was a nurse practitioner, which meant she had the ability to prescribe drugs. She could not take a free lunch from a drug company, because it used to not be that way, but then they passed all these sunshine laws, and they basically drug companies used to pay providers like, we'll pay for your Continue Ed and we'll fly you to Florida and you can do 2 hours of Continue Ed and get a 3-hour sales pitch on our drug. That kind of stuff. You can't do that anymore in the healthcare world, because it was seen as this is a problem. Like, it was basically paid access to providers, to prescribe. And the idea was, with clearly the drug company is hoping, like, okay, you'll prescribe our cholesterol drug over the other person's cholesterol drug.
Right.
And so there are sunshine laws everywhere now that basically do not allow that to happen. And so there's still drug reps and they come around and they talk to people, but like I said, they couldn't even buy them lunch. Let alone anything else. And so I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like in healthcare, we've said maybe not, with that kind of idea.
Of course, we moved that to the insurance companies. So now it's how many are vaccinated and things. And
I just moved around.
Yeah, it just moved.
But,
they figure out a way.
They always figure
Capitalism
out a way.
for you.
Capitalism for you. So, okay.
And in our world, to be clear, vendors still want to take us to lunch and do all that. The difference is we went from, I don't know, Roy, you might know better, but I'm thinking maybe 50 vendors to 70 vendors, something like that, from where we were to over 1,000. And so now they're doing it so that you even see that they exist.
Yeah, and the reality is we can't get there's no money that can kind of come in a roundabout way to Julian and myself today. If we meet with a vendor for lunch to learn about their products in a more clear way for us, on educational way, I don't get paid more or less to use their product. It's indifferent to me. I want to use the products that's best for my client.
Right.
And a great example is what's on your shirt. That was one of those.
Yeah,
some firm we had never heard of, and they were doing a lot of development in Johnstown. Saw that we had a Johnstown office. Like, can you come and meet us and see what we're doing? And obviously they're trying to raise money in a space we weren't interested in, but we would have never known they even existed.
But we did our due diligence to see if that made sense, because we have to, as a required fiduciary for our clients. We got to know what's going on. We got to know what's out there. We got to know what's available.
And that's the other side of it too. Again, and in my wife and her healthcare example, there were still the drug companies still paid people to go around and educate people about the drugs, because you do also have to know there's new stuff all the time. There's new stuff coming out. You do have to know like how particular drugs work and everything like that. And it's not possible for one provider to keep up on everything. So it's, there is a value in that. There's value in getting educated on what's going on, and sometimes you gotta go to the horse's mouth. And I don't think anybody has any problem with that.
Yep.
Right. But so it sounds like, you're working for a large company, comes with all the constraints that come with working from a large organization, which is again that kind of like lowest common denominator. The larger an organization is, the more management you have to management, the more you have to hem people in. You don't necessarily want people off doing creative things if you're not sure what the risk is. So you have all those constraints around you, just working for a large company that anybody who's worked for a large company probably understands, whether it's in retail or insurance or healthcare or whatever. The bigger the organization, the more restricted you're going to be. So you have all those restrictions. And then you have that broker-dealer regulatory model that comes with its own kind of pluses and minuses. But for you guys, it sounds like you were seeing like the running up against more of the minuses of that model for what you wanted to do than the positives.
Well, and what we ultimately did, and Julian has kind of always been a really good student of the business, coming from a sales background of a different company and having a lot of that management experience. So there's always looking at, okay, what do we have in front of us and what's out there? So we went through a process of being really fiduciaries for our clients and saying, what does exist out there that we don't know? And is there some design or model that exists that's better than what we're currently in?
Right.
And would it serve our clients better if we did that? That was the question, right? We didn't know actually when we went into it. Julian might have had a better inkling than I did, but I didn't know. I didn't know. I never had looked at it like that, right?
So let me give a small plug for our What is Financial Planning episode, where we actually talked about, the difference about what it is to be a financial planner and the different structure and what that means about being a fiduciary and all that kind of stuff. We really did a deep dive into that, which I think is great. Mm-hmm. But I do think it probably bears to give like a little 2-minute reminder for maybe our less loyal listeners, what is differentiating about the framework you're under now as an actual financial planner in a technical sense?
Well, the technical sense of it is the regulatory oversight piece, right? So number one, we're paid by our clients and only our clients. Okay. And what Julian mentioned earlier is that we are required to basically act in our client's best interest, but not just say it. We actually have to be able to prove it. Like to a reasonable human being that they can say, is this actually in their best interest if you do this?
Right.
Think trust company. It's similar. It's not the same,
right?
But it's similar.
Yep. So that's the biggest difference. So that all those soft dollars I referenced don't exist in our world. So that conflict that could be created is no longer even an option for us.
Okay.
And that's probably the biggest difference. Were you thinking of something different?
Well, no. And let me add to that just for clarity. Soft dollars do exist, but if they apply, if there's so for instance, I know Fidelity had a program. I don't know if they still do, but if you used enough of their stuff, they gave you a license to a software program. And the reason they did it that way is if there is something, the benefit of that soft dollar must equally benefit all clients. It cannot benefit you.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so there is some, just for clarity, but it's how it's applied very, very different.
Right. So I know again, because I know you, and we've talked about this before too, and Julian, I'm going to assume it's the same, is what I have always felt and really appreciated is a very client-centric focus to things. So having that, being under that other model where, your ultimate responsibility is to the best interest of the client, I know it definitely fits with your both of your ethoses. And so it sounds like somewhere along the way it was like, the best way we can do that work, even though it's probably difficult and risky, is to extract ourselves from the Titanic, if you will, and that large, and that restrictive thing, and, strike out on our own where, we get to be a little bit the masters of our own destiny, and we get to do it in a way that focuses your guys' time and energy where you wanted to focus, which is on the client, the opposite of some of those people you were kind of ragging on at the beginning.
Right.
It's like you want to spend time, and I know, Roy, from us together just talking, it's like that's the piece of the work you enjoy is actually getting to know people and their goals and what's going on, and how do you guys in your capacity help people reach those goals?
Yep. And to add to that, where I came from before was Luana and Associates, which some know, not all, but is owned by kind of the most successful roll-up called Global Imaging, and that eventually got bought by Xerox. Oh. And the way that Global worked was every company was a different experiment, and usually every branch also was, down to sales reps. So what they knew was they made nothing. Their people were everything they had, so they put lots of training into people and gave them lots of flexibility to experiment. And though they had written the industry's benchmarks, they regularly tripled them. Mm-hmm. And the rest of the industry was like, how do you do it? Even when Xerox bought them, they coined a phrase called global time, because we were moving so much faster than them, they couldn't even understand how. And so I had seen that if you just constantly improve and allow that freedom, the end result is so much better, exponentially so. And when I started to study for the CFA, I was told, well, maybe I shouldn't be at this firm, because why would you go to that level of education? Well, which is to help a client?
It's a great point that you said too, because I got my CFP, Credentialed Certified Financial Planner, excuse me, and that was a eye-opening experience of what the expectation was to do fully integrated planning for people.
Okay. Yeah.
That I realized where I was at the time, I couldn't do because they wouldn't let me.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And when Julian got his CFA, stands for Chartered Financial Analyst, that was probably a really big eye-opening experience for him as well, to be like, I can't do this here. Like, I can't actually use this here.
And one of those many nails in that coffin too was because I knew people who were the co-chairs of our investment committee for that firm. I was talking to them about something called factor-based investing. They have on staff 180 CFAs. We all study factor-based investing, and he said he was unaware of that. As a firm, they really had no knowledge in that space. Meanwhile, BlackRock was trying to recruit me to be a wholesaler to wholesalers so that I could come in as the specialist and help financial advisors and the wholesalers. So I wrote them a white paper, and they're like, wow, that's really neat. We're going to buy some technology to try and learn this. And I was like, but all of you have studied it and passed 3 different tests on it.
Right.
And we have no idea what this is. And I said, well, maybe I could help you. And they're like, no, you're in the field. You wouldn't know anything. I was like, but isn't it my white paper that started all this?
Right.
Yeah, of course. Can I publish that? No. You can't have an opinion on that.
So, Julian, would you say that the CFA is the top of the food chain for investments?
It depends on what you're doing, but Wall Street Journal does call it one of the world's hardest tests. It's primarily master's level coursework with a little bit of PhD level. What's interesting is, hard as it is, so 1 in 5 who start finish, only I think it's 12%. You'd have to check their website to be certain, but 12-15% can successfully do each test without failing. Anyway, all that said, if you learn by the end that it's really just the beginning, it gives you all of the framework to do valuation and the green eye shade work. I'd say that's basically done other than experience. But high frequency trading, hedge funds, private equity, any alternatives like that, you learn the start of what if you're going to go in that space, need to learn. Because initially, this was started in part by Warren Buffett's mentor. And the idea was to formalize what an analyst does for Wall Street. And that was its only purpose originally, was to be a Wall Street analyst and eventually portfolio manager, because that's their chain.
Got it.
It has broadened now to where for the CFA Society in Colorado, I believe somewhere around 22% are financial advisors. Somewhere 7-ish% do corporate analyst jobs. Of course, some go into corporate treasuries and other things like that. But certainly it's not just a Wall Street analyst anymore. And of course, our industry has expanded in what's possible. So a lot of their curriculum is setting that foundation so that if you go in that field, now you know where to look, and how to learn more.
And the biggest thing I think you said there of all that stuff, I glaze over. But that's why it's important, because there's people like you that exist, because I don't want to do it.
Right.
But what he said was it was only the beginning.
Right.
Which is part of a learning, a concept, right? He's a lifelong learner for the industry, because you know that you're never going to know it all, and you know it's never going to stay the same.
Right.
And I realized the same thing when I got my CFP. It took 1/3 of the time for me to get my CFP that it took him to get his CFA.
Right.
Like that's how.
But most people don't even get CFP.
No, most don't.
I mean,
it's hard.
Let's not sell yourself short here, right?
I know, but I'm just saying, like, that's the level of commitment that it takes to get the CFA. And that's why, understanding the learning piece of it for Julian on the investment side, the learning piece of it for me on the planning side, that's why I got my CFP, because I wanted to understand what I didn't understand.
Right.
And when I got done with it, it was the same thing. I was like, I'm never going to understand it all, because it just keeps changing.
And there's more and more.
It's nuanced, and there's new rules, and it created this learning mentality that I had, the same learning mentality that Julian had, which ultimately ties into why did we name our company Credentialed Wealth Advisors, which is like kind of a mouthful, if you will.
It is.
But credentialed we wanted it to be a concept where we were creating an environment of learning.
Right.
So to be in this company, you want to be credentialed so that you can actually say, I'm committing to lifelong learning for my industry and my profession.
And usually people who have them, that's what they do. And CFA, because it's so difficult to get and it's so comprehensive in what you study, no, it does not require, though it does track continuing education. And this actually partly drew me to that group too, but I think it's 98% of CFAs, even though it's voluntary, do CEs every year and well above what they would require. Because it's just who we are.
Right. You don't do that unless you want to learn. You don't learn that.
Well, you know, it's very interesting too, because I was thinking about this the other day. I have some things I subscribe to about just learning about certain things in the industry, and I actually look forward to learning my CE every year. Yeah. Because I just feel like I'm better and I'm staying, aware of what's going on. And when, I was in my previous firm, I didn't have my CFP. You had to do CE because it was just required. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you just figure out, well, how do I knock this out as quick as possible versus actually digging into a topic and learning more. Mm-hmm. So I really do actually enjoy my CE now versus what I used to of how I used to approach it.
So let's get back to, because this is, I think, the meat of the story, especially for those of us who are kind of lay people in all of this, is the actual launching of your guys' of Credentialed Wealth Advisors, of CWA. So you guys, somewhere between Bar in Romania and now, this idea comes together to say, but we could. Like, there's things like, we don't have to stay on the giant ship. Mm-hmm. Like, we could do our own thing. We could do it the way that we feel that we're feeling called to do it, and that would allow us to use all these great, things that we've learned and really put our, and then really build like this client focused sense, because, I know Roy's heart and I know he's not into it for the money. Like, it's not just about, I'm going to go out on my own so I can make more money. I haven't heard that at all in the story. And I don't, because I know you, I know that's not how it is. But tell me about that, like from, going, let's actually deciding to do this thing, launch this thing on your own through, it actually existing. What was that process like?
Well, there was, from meeting in Romania to moving forward, there was actually probably about a year, I think, maybe a little over a year of fiduciary.
It was from February to October, I think.
Yeah, review on, we didn't know what we didn't know, so we said, well, let's just start at the beginning and start talking to all these different entities that exist out there about what they do, how they do it, and just understand more, right? And that's actually where we started, relatively speaking. And then from
there's
there,
about 40 different models you can do in our industry, affiliations and all these different things.
Yep. So we realized that the space of what they call the RIA, Registered Investment Advisor, that's the specific design that's under the SEC compliance regime. Okay. So we're an SEC registered firm. And you have to jump through some hoops to get that, actually, which we're really proud of being that. Yeah. And we decided that was the model we wanted to do. Okay. We also decided that was going to be a painful move because you went from having, all the compliance regime and, just bookkeeping and just day-to-day stuff being done to, okay, now it's 100% yours.
Right. You got to do it all.
You got to figure it all out, right? Yeah. So then we went through a process of speaking with different custodians. Okay, custodian is a company that exists to hold client money, right? And there's a lot of them out there, like Fidelity and Charles Schwab and Raymond James and Pershing and LPL, Altruist. So there's a lot of different ones out there. So we actually went through a process of looking at all of them, right? And at the end of the day, we kind of decided that we felt Raymond James, which is who was our custodian. We decided we wanted to be multi-custodial one day. Right now, we just have one custodian, but because of our design, we can actually have multiple custodians because we don't work for a custodian. Right. They essentially partner with us.
Right.
Right.
And they're provide a strategic vendor.
Yeah, they provide a service of, I can't keep the client's money in my garage, so we keep it with a custodian that if
But we got the dog.
Right. If we're hit by a bus, though, the client's money is safe and sound. There's no risk to the client. Right. All of the online risk and all that stuff, it's all protected through that custodian, just like any other person's money that invests money. So we went through that.
You're not reinventing that wheel of taking the funds, managing it, investing it where you all tell them to invest it, and the online things. I notice, like, when I log into my accounts, I'm logging in through Raymond James. And, all kinds of stuff. So that all exists.
They're the platform, right, that just holds it.
Right.
That's all they do. We do everything else. So we do all the lever pulling.
Right.
They just hold it where we tell it to be held.
And I'll be honest, like that's kind of where you want the big thing. Like you want the big institutional, we don't do anything fun or creative. We follow all the rules.
Yep.
You know, you kind of want the Raymond James out there
That's right.
or whoever it is, you know, being big and steady and being like, yep, your money's here, you know.
But the reason we kind of fell on them was because our other alternative was kind of going through a merger at the time, and it looked pretty messy on the outside, and it sounds like it was actually from the inside.
From what we've heard, it's messy.
So we chose Raymond James. They've been a great partner to work with. Nobody's perfect, but any issues we've had, they've been able to work through it with us, which has been pretty awesome, meaning they're receptive, if that makes sense. And they ultimately were where we fell because they also have really nice ancillary services where, you know, if our clients need help with trust services or if our clients need help with insurance services or those kinds of things, they actually have people that we can reach out to get assistance, and it creates a nicer experience for the client.
Right.
Gets more things on one statement for the clients, which is always nicer than when it has to be a bunch of different institutions.
Yeah. And I think that's a good lesson for anybody, no matter what it is you want to do. If you want to, you know, especially if you want to be entrepreneurial, set on your own, chances are some of the big things you're going to have to figure out, somebody's already figured out. Yeah. Right? Like, you know, there is some special sauce with you two and what you're doing and who you are that's in there. But there are also off-the-shelf solutions, you know, out there. So you've got a Raymond James out there that's, you know, that's there. It's big. It's stable. You know, you all went through a vetting process to make sure that it's something that you have confidence in, which helps me as a client have confidence in it. But you didn't have to invent that wheel, right? That wheel existed.
Right.
And I imagine there are other places, too, where you're able to find some kind of more off-the-shelf things that you can you know, do. It's like Shopify, right? Like nobody should have to set up, if you're doing online marketing or online sales anymore, nobody sets up their own web store. You go to Shopify because like Fortune 500 use it and mom and pops use it. Like it just exists. It works fine. You just do it.
I'd say everything we've used is off the shelf except for some of the stuff we're working on for investing.
Well,
which
so
is part of what's being creative.
Let's actually transition to that because actually the next piece of what I want to talk about was we figured out our compliance regime, which was the SEC and the RIA design. We figured out a custodian, which was Raymond James to partner with. And then there's the really big issue in the industry, which is called the tech stack.
The tech stack.
It is this big ominous machine of all these different things that we can use to help with clients and understand the data and show reporting and do trading and all that good stuff, right?
So the part of me that has the computer science degree just got really excited.
I know you would love that process, probably.
But you'd be very disappointed because it's very duct taped.
Oh no, hey man, they all are.
Yeah.
Hate to tell you.
So I think that he probably understands it better.
No, maybe.
You actually don't know his background, but that's actually fun. So we went through the custodian process, and then we also went through the tech stack process, right? And then at the end of the day, the names of that stuff doesn't matter to clients because it's not really client facing stuff. But we figured out what we wanted to use. But there is a hole in the industry that we feel exists, and there are people trying to fill it, but it matches our desire is to be able to create an investment experience for clients that really matches their goal experience.
Right.
And Julian, what's that called?
So it's called goals-based investing.
Goals-based.
And so I stumbled across it, literally one sentence in an article that somebody was trying to work on that. And the closest version was in the CFA, they had this very contrived method of allocating your capital. So let's say you have the 100,000 across goals based on the time horizon and the return you had to get to that goal. So that was a really rough framework of goals-based planning.
Okay.
And I thought it was cool at the time, and I reached out to my instructor, and he was like, "Yeah, you can't really do that. It's iteration upon iteration. It kind of kills the math, and it's too many assumptions in that methodology. It's there to spark interest, and that's really its purpose. Don't bother studying too much there." And so then I found this one sentence that somebody was working on something similar. His name is Franklin Parker. Reached out to him, and we've been good friends since. And then also GMO, Grantham. Do you remember their full name?
I don't remember their name.
It's Jeremy Grantham's company. They also were working on something, and he and the founder on that side had worked through some necessary math that didn't exist to make it more possible. So what goals-based does is, like Roy said, is instead of using risk tolerance as the maximum cap for all of your money, which is how our entire industry works today, it connects your goals. Because right now, today, if you do your whole financial plan, then in essence, your financial advisor is closing that book, then having you do this risk tolerance and saying that is totally irrelevant. We're now going to invest according to these 6 questions you just answered.
All of your money.
All of your money in one way, because that's the regulatory.
Well, and it's even worse than that because it's largely account by account as well, which is a problem because do I have all of my retirement in one account? Probably not. I have different types of accounts that hold money in different ways that have different taxation that I want all that to play together in the most tax efficient way possible, right? So if I have a really tax positive account that has good benefits to me, we won't get into the details because we've talked about that on previous podcasts.
We've talked a lot about that.
I want to have my high growth investments in those tax advantaged accounts are the best. And I want to have my low growth investments in my accounts that maybe I don't want to have as much growth because there's less tax advantage, but they're still appropriate for certain situations, yada, yada, yada. Right. Okay. A lot of stuff there, but that's part of the problem with the industry was it was at our previous firm, it was account by account, period.
Yeah.
Period.
But they still had to all be the exact same risk. And that's because that's just been it's something that someone did and the whole industry adopted it. The SEC's rule is essentially that you have a process. And so what goals-based does is it replaces that framework. You might still go and do a risk tolerance to understand their willingness to take risk.
Right.
But now instead, they are prioritizing their goals in order, in a linear order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these how I care about it. And then they're also saying how important it is that they achieve it. So if it's a complete wish, you might say 50-50. You know, if I get a shot at it, that's enough for me. If it's your retirement bill money, you have to have it.
Right.
Yeah, your
right?
retirement income, right?
Right. And so those probabilities, we turn those into probabilities, can adjust the risk that you would take, you know, because if you're willing to go 50-50, might hit it, might not, might lose a lot of the money, but I don't care because I'm putting a tiny, tiny amount in. You can do that under this. And so example, let's say that you gave me $10,000 and said, I want a sailboat in 10 years. I need it to be a 35-foot boat and blah, blah, blah. In the risk tolerance regime, I would say, that's crazy. We can't achieve that. So thanks for playing. Go do it yourself. Let's talk about your retirement goal because that's the only goal you have.
Right.
And under this, we could say, okay, well, a traditional portfolio would definitely not achieve that. We're going to have to go well outside of the normal spectrum to get the potential reward. And to get that potential reward, we're going to take substantial risk. Are you okay losing it all or losing half or losing how much? And if the answer is yes, then we go find investments whose expected return might be negative or zero, but because of really high volatility, if it hits, you get it. So think venture capital or angel investing, how people thought of Bitcoin early on for Bitcoin,
right?
Because of the huge swings there. So if it hits, you got your boat. If not, oh well, sorry.
Right.
Couldn't do that before. Now you can.
But very small.
And it becomes a tiny amount of your total capital.
And at the bottom, potentially, of that list maybe of what is most important.
It's the wish, right?
So like you might have retirement, buy a house,
right?
You know, whatever, kids' college. You know, there's some things that I might have a little bit more risk tolerance from like my kids' college because there's always loans if you don't get it or whatever.
Right.
But if we could do more, that would be great. You know, then my example is going to be like in 5 years I want to buy a sports car. Right, I'm going to give you $10,000 in 5 years I want to buy a sports car. It might be a Porsche, it might be a Miata, or it may be a little Matchbox car if that's all that's left.
But that's specifically connecting your money to that goal.
To your investments,
right?
And the converse side of that too, because people hear that example sometimes and think, oh my gosh, it's just a way to take lots of risk. Well, the converse side is the bill money you have to achieve. It's 99% probability. So the return, the investment structure for that is going to be very low risk because it must be achieved.
Right.
And so and more of your money is going to be applied toward that goal much more because we're trying to make it so that the return it needs to get is very, very low. Mm-hmm. So, and so that's something that doesn't exist. I've been working with both those firms to help get it along. To be clear, I'm just working with them in terms of ideas and sharing thoughts and things. They're doing the hard work of making it.
So that is something you say doesn't exist in the industry right now.
That's right. And you cannot do that today.
That you have some interest in exploring and figuring out, like, how can we be a voice in helping, fill this gap?
Yep.
And of course, something you never would be able to do. On HMS Titanic.
That's right.
But now as an independent, you can say, and you can look at your own clients and say, I can see within the life of my own clients a need for this. Like, this is not just, this isn't, just Julian and Roy think this thing needs to exist. I can look around and say, you yourself know that you have clients that have these mixed goals.
And the big thing of that is, can it be done? Well, yeah, it could be done, but there's not a piece of technology right now that exists that can make the interface usable for scale, right? So we could do it client by client, and we'd have to charge them a lot of money to do it, right? So to create an interface,
we could have like 15 clients each,
right? That would have the interface that would give the trading platform that would connect to the goals, which would connect to what investments need to be moved, if their investments need to rebalance, all that stuff. It'll keep the money connected to the goal and how it's positioned. But is all of your money in 16 accounts for each goal that you have? No, right? It's conglomerated amongst your different accounts, but a tool that could actually isolate it within the trading platform and kind of show you as a client interface as well when you log in, like, oh, look at my goal of this and look at my goal of that. Well, my overall portfolio is up this percent or down that percent, but we don't care necessarily because I care about what's that money doing for that goal, what's that money doing for that goal, right? That's what the client would care about. And that's what all clients actually care about, but they've been taught to just look at return.
Right.
And say, well, is that good or bad?
Right.
And, to that point, that was one of the ways Franklin and I first became friends, because he sent me his book. So I read through his book, which was essentially his proposal of we need to work on this in the industry. And he had a small chapter on reporting. And that was actually what I thought was the most important piece, because the rest of it is math. And no one cares about the math except CFAs like me and stuff like that. They care about the output. But the reporting I thought was most important because it can change the conversations between financial advisors and clients. Because instead of, here's your return, right? Because that's all we report today. And then here's your retirement plan and other plan and goals and things over here. What this would do is say, here's your goal. Here's the money you need. Here's the money allocated towards it today and growing. Here's the rate of return you need, the rate of return you got. Here's the benchmark. So you can still compare the quality of your advisor in terms of investments. But the focus now is on the goal and on what you need for it in terms of return, instead of, well, the S&P did this. Who cares? Most people aren't in the S&P by itself.
Well, and clients don't know how to digest that either. Right?
Yeah.
They're like, well, I don't know what that means to me, so what do I do with it?
And then importantly for the risk side too, for the digestion, you just reminded me, because you have all of their goals when they're needed, when that cash flow is needed, you can calculate the maximum loss that they can accept before they could not achieve the goal. And this was actually Franklin's inspiration for beginning this, because he started working through CFA and things, 2008 is what made him start to work through the CFA, because he was just doing what the industry told him to do, buy and hold and all this kind of stuff. He actually also worked at our former employer, left before us and went and did other things. But he watched clients blow up and not be able to recover.
Yeah.
So now, having those timing, you can know I can accept a loss up to this. You can quantify it. Today, for most people, that losses are bad for you, but you don't know what you can accept. Is 15% too much?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Maybe it's 30, maybe it's 50, but now they know and we know, so you can manage that accordingly. And hey, we're getting really close to your threshold. We need to take risk off the market. This is more of a financial crisis than a drawdown or whatever the case is. You can now manage to that. They can too. And so if it's a traditional down market, Now they don't have to worry at all. Like, nobody likes to lose, but they know it'll bounce back. But they can see it's nowhere near their threshold, and everything's fine.
Right. I like that.
Yeah.
So I like the idea, and I think it's important that, it's great to, when you're on your own, you start to have a lot more flexibility, and then, but not everybody always takes advantage of it.
Sure.
Right. So this is one of those places where you all are exploring something new and different that you couldn't do otherwise. I'm also curious, like, from like just on the human side of kind of leaving, the safety of the big ship, going out on your own, having to, really, you're responsible, right? You eat what you catch, kind of thing. From on a personal level, like, how was that? I mean, I goes without saying, anxiety around it, and some, maybe some sleepless nights, or whatever. Like, are we doing the right thing? But as you work through that process, like, I'm curious what that was like for you, and at what point did you go, oh, we made the right choice? Like, early on anything, there's always that little, like, you're like, I'm not sure we made the right choice, but there must be a point now where you're like, actually, we probably, what we're doing is good.
The decision for me was, we were working so hard when we originally launched the company, that not a lot of thought went into whether it was right or wrong. It was just that we had a task in front of us, right?
Just getting the work done.
Yeah, because you had to, we had to have an attorney. We had to make sure we did things in a legal way so we wouldn't get sued. A lot of stuff had to go into that. And that was done prior to the launching of the company. And I think a lot of that, are we doing the right thing or not, was flushed out in that process. Okay. Truly, because then...
Until launch day.
Well, when we launched, it was pretty stressful, right? Because you just went from having a paycheck to zero, right. So then every ounce of energy you had went into making the transition, right? And that transition probably took a legitimate 3 months to know that, like, okay, we're fine, we're going to be okay,
right?
We actually had to meet a threshold of assets under management to be SEC registered. And that we had to have
100 million by April, I think it was.
Yeah. So it was a short period of time to get to that number. And that was our goal, is to be an SEC registered firm. Right. So we made that goal. And once we surpassed that, it was kind of like, okay, great. And we could take a breath of fresh air and just, evaluate where we're at and figure out some of the things we didn't know. One of the things that our compliance company that we hired, which is a kind of a fun story, is that they were like, you guys got to chill out. And we were like, what do you mean? Like, we need to be serious about compliance. They're like, you came from the North Korea of compliance. Like, we'll tell you where the lines are, don't cross them, but you guys are like, 7 standard deviations away from it kind of thing. And
she's like, you're actually going to make it worse because you're going to set compliance traps for yourselves that exist for big firms only.
Yeah. So it was really interesting to go through that experience and having that talk to us about, like, hey, that's actually when I realized that the compliance piece of it was previous firm that we were at, versus the actual rules of the underlying compliance entity, like the SEC.
And sometimes you don't know the difference.
So we know where the SEC lines are at, and do we want to live on the line? No. We think we have a better standard than the line.
Sure.
But we don't need to go way deeper and make things impossible or really expensive for ourselves when we're meeting the spirit of the rule. Right. In a really reasonable way.
Well, that flexibility is what you wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of it.
So that was a really eye-opening experience, probably through that launching process. Because we were trying to create all these kind of rules and design and and we just didn't need to do that. Right. We do have a process that we have to go through. We've actually been audited by the SEC, and what they told us was that we have a good system. They actually said it was one of their quickest audits.
Yeah. And not because there's
anything
wrong.
They even went for a speed record, they said.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes, I mean, and just to be clear.
No, we have to be audited.
You have to be. It's like we do annual audits at the church. It's like you just not because anything's wrong, but because you need to keep up with stuff. And I know, I remember a plug for our employee handbook episode.
Yes. Ann Larson.
Thank you, Ann Larson. That those kind of things are important, but I think even there we talked about like a level of reasonableness around it. Like, there's a point at which you're getting overly you're tying your own hands.
Yeah, if you make the rule and you don't follow it, or you can't follow it because it's just not really possible, it's worse to have the rule.
Yeah.
Oh, worst thing you can do is have a rule and then not follow it.
Yeah.
So for me, that was probably the biggest thing through launch. And from there, it was just, how do we kind of standardize things? We're really designed to be a decentralized company. Julian's down in Colorado Springs. I'm up here in Johnstown. We're talking with people who potentially will join our firm that could be in different locations. So we need to create processes that are more decentralized. How do we keep information flowing in a way that, there's not, information that gets dropped or lost, or, it keeps everything on pace for the clients.
Right.
In the world we live in today, you could have a really fantastic employee that lives in Maryland.
Oh, yeah.
And they work remote 100%, but we got to be able to have a way to share that information. So that's really the thought process that started from then, because we actually had a couple other people, but it ended up not just working out. Any new business, you kind of have people come and go, as and really any big business too. But we just realized that, okay, we need to have something that's a little bit easier to pass information on, to not drop the ball, to if Julian's out of the office sick or I'm out of the office sick, then we have processes to be able to cover our clients. And that's actually a really important thing that we haven't talked about yet too, is one of the reasons that Julian and I wanted to do it together versus like I could just do it myself, Julian could do it by himself, is that one, you're better together, but two, God forbid something happens to me, I've got my backup plan built in.
Yes.
Same thing for Julian.
Yes.
He's got his backup plan built in. And that was really important for me personally, being that everything's about the client focused.
Yeah.
That I really wanted to have that as part of it. And, that's why being partners made a really, really good sense to us.
Right.
Yeah.
At the time. And now we're just looking at how do we grow forward and what technology do we use and can we get goals-based figured out? And that's all fun stuff.
And I'm going to go talk to my pastor and say, hey, well, you want to start a podcast?
Yeah, I started a podcast. That was actually one of the most, I told Julian, I love doing the podcast.
He raves about it.
It fills my cup. Well, and Jeremy was talking the same thing. We're coming out probably a couple weeks ago when we did one. And he's like, man, I just really enjoy this. This is just a lot of fun.
No, it's great. It's great. And of course, I don't think we can not talk about the most important and in my the most consequential decision you made when you launched this whole thing is you hired Becky.
Well, Becky was a pivotal piece.
I was going to say.
For all the people that know Becky, everybody loves Becky.
Let's throw some love.
And what's funny, because sometimes if Becky's out or whatever, I'll answer the phone. Same for Julian, and you maybe don't have as much as me, but the client will be like, "Oh, I was trying to get Becky."
Yeah,
I was like, "Well, okay, I guess I could take a message."
People do that when they call here. They're like, "Oh, we really wanted to talk to Nicole," and I'm like, "Sorry, you got the pastor." I don't know what to tell you. I'll do my best.
Employees are really important, and treating your people well is really important to us. And that's why we have Ann was on the podcast, because Ann's been a consultant for us and been really important. And Ann is focused on people.
Yeah.
And we got to have people that are aligned with us like that are our people. And our compliance company is actually very good in that regard too.
They are.
Plug
for Polaris.
Yeah, Polaris. Shout out Polaris.
Yep.
Spencer, buddy.
Yeah,
this is Spencer from Polaris. You're awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. But go Tide, baby.
Well, I think there's probably like 4 more episodes we can do just on some of the stuff we touched on, but it's kind of a way of wrapping up this one. I'm just curious, what if somebody out there is thinking about maybe making that transition, especially that transition of, from somewhere, from the Titanic, from that big place, and saying, I wonder if it's time for me to go out on my own, all that kind of stuff. What would you say is the most important lesson you learned in that process of moving from that place of stability, but probably feeling a little constrained, into this place where now more risk, more volatility necessarily in your personal lives. I mean, just personally, but so much more freedom. So what would you say that, what's the one big thing you learned in that process, or a couple of big things you learned in making that transition that you would want to pass along, whatever that person may be wanting to do?
I got mine. You got yours?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so I've gotten tons of calls since we did this for that exact advice. One of the first things I've learned from those calls is that no matter how much due diligence you do or how much you think you know about our industry, you don't know near enough. Mm-hmm. And so people are focusing their time wrong. And my basic advice today is, look, no matter which way you leave that big ship, you're going to be happier. So instead of worrying about your tech stack or even how you affiliate, because there's multiple versions of RAs we didn't get into, first, What do you want your data to look like? How do you want your client interactions to be? What are you trying to accomplish? Write all of that out. Get that down. And then back into what tech stack can accomplish that, which affiliation can do that. And the rest won't matter. Just know you're going to be happier when you leave.
Yeah.
And we actually were told by one of our vendors, I think it was the month before we left, and Roy was pretty nervous. So he was like, let's call him and see, because he did the same.
He had done it before.
Yeah, because he had done it. Yeah, so now go from there.
Yeah,
because you tell the story better.
Yeah, so we were like, why are we doing this? And we asked him, like, tell us, why are we doing this, right? Because he'd done it, and we didn't know the other side and what it looked like yet. And he went through, well, you're doing it because of this, you're doing it because of this, you're doing it because of, like, he just went through all of it, and we're like, well, yeah, we're doing this, right? Yeah. Like, it was no more.
Well, my favorite of that, he was like, well, you're in a 10 by 10 cage, and they serve you gruel every day. I don't know. Maybe you like gruel. Maybe you think gruel is amazing. But I would rather have a steak sometimes, maybe seafood next, and this and that and the other.
That was a really good one.
And, get out and stretch my legs, not have 10 by 10 cells. So
yep.
I like that. I'm an old Simon Sinek guy, and I mean the whole like know your why. Like if you don't know why you're doing it. When before I was here, I used to actually help people who wanted to start new churches. Like so, I worked with church planners, and there's a lot of like the detail stuff that goes into it and everything. But at the end of the day, it's like, why are you doing it? Who are you trying to reach? What is the purpose behind this? Like worry less about who your website's going to be and all that kind of stuff. Like and if you don't have that strong why about why you want to do it, most successful project I was involved with was a church down in Denver called Free, and it was a guy who was recovering, who himself was in recovery, and he's like, I want to reach alcoholics, and I'm like, but probably more than that too, and I'm like, yeah, and he stumbled into things like, I want to create a place for alcoholics, live one of alcoholics, and spiritual refugees, he called it. And I'm like, great, that's your why. Everything else, like, perfect. Hold on to that, and we'll figure the rest of it out.
Yeah.
And he's gone like gangbusters, and the only differentiator is he had that strong sense of purpose and knew why he was doing what he was doing.
Well, and that's for me, leaving, and what have I learned is I had never run a small business before.
Right.
Our previous employer told us to think like business owners all the time, but I actually didn't know what that meant fully until I became a business owner. And my realization has been that being a business owner is a process, not dissimilar from being a financial advisor or financial planner or a chartered financial analyst like Julian. It's a process that we're going to be going through for life. And there's not like this perfect thing that exists, right? Like, our clients work with us because they have belief in us, and we're doing a good job for them, and we earn their trust over time, and we've done good things for them and given them good advice. And that's what the company is today, right?
Right.
And that company will continue to evolve. We'll continue to try and get better, and we'll continue to have people come and go, right? We're looking at an intern potentially next summer. Oh, wow. Something fun, different. We actually had an intern actually for 1 month. We can only get them for a month recently in the last year, which that was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest realization, because I thought I was going to be able to go and then have all this, this business is this is what it was, right? And that's not a business, right? That's not how it works. And then the really fun thing is, I've been talking with local business owners here in Johnstown that are talking about, how do we create a really good experience for clients? And every company has this to deal with. Right. And what is that experience like? Even the church, right? What's the experience for a guest to come for the first time, and who greets them, and who talks to them? What's the follow-up? So being able to then get other business owners to actually maybe pull together and start talking about those kinds of things together, right? And share ideas. And that's something fun that I love that. And that's going to be a process that's going to be ongoing for the rest of my career.
Right.
It doesn't end. And, so when I left, I thought, well, okay, we start the business, and then we're at my financial advisor, right? But no, it's a process. It's going to be a process, and we're going to constantly evolve to get better for our clients. And we're going to constantly evaluate and continue to be the best fiduciaries we can. And if the industry adjusts, we'll adjust. Right. That's how it's going to work.
Well, let me just, I'm going to do a little thought. I was thinking that you guys hadn't brought this up, but I imagine, no doubt part of this process for you individually was your own process of goal setting and all the financial planning that went into it that let you do this. I mean, not everybody is in a place where they can not have a paycheck, even for a short amount of time. But there's a valley there, when you want to, where you need to be able to, care for yourself and your responsibilities and if your family, if you have them or whatever. And sometimes, that can be the thing that overwhelms people into doing something, especially entrepreneurial, is, all those other responsibilities. Well, that is what, again, financial planning, and why I love, goal-based, and Roy and I have had this conversation about my personal goals, and now we're having this now that I'm recently remarried, with my new wife, what her goals are, and we've been having these conversations too about like, where do we want to be and how do we want to get there, and what's it going to take, and to let us do that. So no doubt that was, probably something because of what you do, is almost second nature, but I do think this is just a plug for financial planning, period, for, especially for us lay folks, is this is what that lets you do. Your goal might be retirement, yes, but your goal also may be in 10 years. I don't want to work for anybody else anymore. I want to open my own hardware store. I don't want to work for Ace, or, nothing wrong with Ace, love Ace hardware. Or I want to do that. Like, great. Most things are achievable with, planning and hard work. You don't just decide one day to do it and the next day you throw out your shingle and you're done, right? I mean, right. All that prep work too in your own, being able to make sure that you're able to, support everything you need to support while you're making that transition is big.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
well, and to your point, a lot of people starting businesses, they think the infrastructure. I've trained a lot of entrepreneurs to launch. Used to sit on a board for that specifically, but the first thing, everybody gets business cards and stationery and things like that.
To make them feel bona fide.
Yeah. Even before they get their business license at the state, right?
I got my card.
And that's probably the least important thing, right? They haven't tested their idea. They haven't talked to anybody about it. And there's so many ways to bootstrap start. For us, like you said, that's what we do. So it's easier to think through the planning steps.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily need to bootstrap because we can already see the economics, and as long as enough people trust us, and they follow, we're okay, right? But yeah, a lot of times it's just that planning and testing.
Yeah, I think anymore it's the you go out and you buy the domain.
Yeah,
it's less the business card. At least maybe that's my world. I've owned so many random web domains over the years for some crazy idea I had that I never actually did anything with. But I bought the domain for it. So. Well, I think it's an inspiring story. I've gotten to kind of be alongside Roy as a friend, and as he's been through it, I was one of the earlier clients coming on board. Actually ended up talking to you initially to help us out with some stuff right at the time that all this transition was happening for you. So kind of got to get on the ground floor of it, and it's been fun and more than that, honestly, inspiring. And I just want to say that it's been inspiring for me, and I know it's been, I think, inspiring for others too, to see people, have a thought that, especially a thought that is built around serving others. Yeah. And I think, just as a pastor and as a Christian, that's important to me, obviously, as I think, but for most people, it's an important thing, and say there's different ways for people. And I've seen this as a calling in Roy's life. And normally when we talk about calling, we talk about things like I do. But people are called to do all sorts of things. Like, I get to care for people's souls, and that's great. But we also need somebody caring for my retirement. Yeah. And it is every bit as important, and every bit as, and needs to be handled, I think, in that kind of, integrity with integrity.
Well, that's really, I really do appreciate that, because, Julian and I have been in talks quite a bit. And one of the things I keep saying was like, and I think I probably said on here too, but it's just to educate, empower, and inspire. Yeah. Is huge, and not inspire is probably the most important to me, because I want to be inspired as a person. Right, I watched the SpaceX shuttle launch, and then the
toothpick.
The Starship where they grabbed it out of the
sky. Out of the sky. That was amazing.
That is an inspiring thing to me personally. That inspires. It's inspiring for humanity, and I'm not gonna do something like that, but just to be inspiring. So I want to be inspired, and I want to inspire, and that's really important to me. And if you're not doing that and having fun in life, then what's the point? Yeah. We really gotta enjoy the process that you're in, because there's there's peaks and valleys, but you're in the process the whole time, right?
Right.
And enjoying it with people that are equally minded and hardworking and care about people, that's important.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's more conversations to follow, for sure. And Julian, it's great to have you. Finally get to meet you in person. This has been wonderful.
It's great to meet you.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. We referenced some previous episodes because we're developing quite a library here at the About Podcast that I'm increasingly proud of. And I've been getting good feedback. I hope you have too. Always interested in folks' questions. If you have ideas or thoughts or topics we want to cover, we've definitely got a list we're working through, but opening to hear more as things go on. And of course, you can follow us on the About Podcast, like, subscribe, all the things, and share it with your friends. I think that's the most important thing you can do. Something tickled you or something, this was helpful to me, chances are it's helpful to somebody else out there too. So that's a great way to support what we're doing and make sure people get the chance to learn alongside all the rest of us.
That's right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
CWA is a Securities and Exchange Registered Investment Advisor. No content contained herein should be construed as an offer for investment advice or an offer for the purchase or sale of any security, insurance, or other investment product. Investments involve the risk of low loss, including loss of principal. Please consult with a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before implementing any strategy presented here. Data presented here are obtained from believed reliable sources but cannot be guaranteed as to completeness or accuracy.